I think of the life of the miner who must work all his day underground, where his lamplight is all that will shine there, and it's dark and it's damp all around. It is 2 or 3 miles to the coal face, and the tunnel is jagged and low, but he cannot find work on the surface, so it's down in the mines he must go.
I'm joined by Sean Wynne, a former teacher and indeed vice principal at the vocational school in Drumshanbo. And Sean would have had a lot of dealings with the mines right throughout his life. And that would have started, Sean, very much with your dad, Johnny, who would have been well known from his time mining and indeed would have been a firesman or a foreman, for a lot of people would describe him, but a firesman in the pit. So what are your memories growing up when your dad was working in the mines?
Well, my father came from Arigna here itself down in Lurgan, and my uncle, Tommy P. Fox, and Jim McGorty, who was originally from Bannatlera. Tommy P. was from just out towards the Mountain Tavern, and the three of them were going off. They used to do the night shift, so they'd be leaving at 4 o'clock in the evening. So when you were coming from school or whatever, they were getting ready to go off for, which was where they had, my father at one stage was doing the cutting with the coal cutter, and the other two were supports in it after the explosions would go off. And so that would be a lifetime of it. Of course, intermixed with all of that would be strikes at one level or another. Here there's a strike on in Lynch's, or there's a strike on in Cross Hill. And even my distant memory would be, earlier memory would be the big strike that went on for whatever, 13 or 14 weeks. And that was about the issue around the 5-day and all of that. So they were always looking to progress. Of course, the owners had to try and make a profit from supplying coal to the power station and selling it locally as well. So there was all of that competing interests in it. But it seemed, you know, people say it was a very hard life and a difficult life. Now, I can't complain, I can't say that I was underground myself, but my brother Aidan spent some time. He wanted to make it fame and fortune, but they closed it down, so he had moved on at this stage.
That's it. Were you ever tempted yourself, Sean, to follow your father's footsteps and come into the mines?
Well, not alone my father's footsteps, but my grandfather and my great-grandfather. In fact, my great-grandfather used to travel 6 months, work here 6 months, and work over in Scotland, as did even including the Leightons themselves. That eventually, there was an article there by Angus Dunn in the Leitrim Guardian a long number of years ago about the whole issue of poker mines and that. So they were always aware of outcrops of this black stuff that was appearing, and the skills that they learned, and obviously the Leightons learned better than everybody else of how to pursue the extraction of the coal. And so genetically there was a whole long period of time that people were involved in the family and in coal mining.
And you would have been somebody, obviously you went on and you were a metalwork teacher, but in that engineering mind, would that have been an advantage, do you think, coming in here? I know some of the guys like Sir Terry Leighton and people we spoke to that, you know, they made a big career by being, I suppose, having that technically minded and coming in and being able to repair stuff. So was there ever that lure to come in?
Not really, as it turned out. I couldn't say I'd be over enthusiastic. I came to in Cross Hill to the picture, Our Lady, and that was far enough for my excursion underground, except when I seen open cast, when I'd be up on the side of the mountain and where they had operated. But for the people that went in underground, and including Lord of Mercy and my father or uncle or Jim McGorty, and Jim was a big man. They at one stage, I think that Cross Hill was coming quite close to Ahabehi, that the two were nearly linked up. They had come across quite a chunk of the mountain underground, but they had long walks, and which was discussed out in Kilronan a number of months ago, was the camaraderie among, and the need that if you were doing a job, that you also needed to be sure that John was doing the job he was supposed to be doing, that it wasn't half done, because it could have implications. And the proof of it, by and large, is the number of tragedies that happened over the entire lifetime, and I'm talking about 150 years, thankfully is minimal.
Very small.
So,
Yeah.
so that's a great.
For many years, as we mentioned, you were a teacher, you were a vice principal in the vocational school in Drumshanbo. Would have, I presume, Sean, in your early years teaching, witnessed a number of students, maybe a number of them promising students, drop out of school to take on jobs here in the mines.
Well, that was always a challenge. Now, that's back, given that I was there for 42 years in school as a teacher and 5 as a student, but even people that were in the same class with me, they would have gone off to work over the summer, and the attraction was that the money was that good to coming back into the dullness of school and no wage packet coming in. So that was definitely a lure for many, and people, you know, there's very few that would regret that was a decision they made, and that they pursued it, that would have done quite well if they had pursued. To say some of them might have dropped out at what was then the group cert after 2 years, or indeed the intercert, and that was it. They decided that they'd give.
Yeah, that was a kind of. There was a trend there, maybe from. I know the group cert ended. Ironically, I think our classes one might have been the last to do it in 1990, and that would have been the same year as the mines closed. But there was a tendency maybe after group cert to head into the mines. And we heard some of the miners talk about family members and how secondary school teachers would have come out and spoke to the parents and looked for them to go back. So, you know, it would have been difficult, I presume, with the money, the lower the money, to get these guys to go back in.
Oh, true. And Pádraig McLaughlin, as the principal in the school, and Jimmy Costello as the vice principal, were always fully aware of seeing very capable people decide to make that choice. Yeah. And they would have brought a number of people back. But then equally, as a drawer on it, you were finished up at 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the day, and you were getting a good, relative to all the wages of a labourer in the immediate area wouldn't be getting the pay that they were getting. So that was, that challenge was there all the time, always. And I mean, for many people, it just became a way of life. And then equally, they would decide after a number of years then that they'd try and head for London. And that was the draw, that the next thing you heard that there was, as you know, from the valley itself, the amount of people that would have left and immigrated to England.
We'll come back to when the mines closed in 1990, and I know from having attended the secondary school at that stage, you were very proactive in driving a campaign to make sure that there was alternative employment, initially maybe to trying to keep the mines open. So you would be what a lot of people can describe as a community activist at the time, not just in Drumshanbo, but to an outer area. There was never really, I suppose, too much of a chance of keeping the mines open and to look for alternative employment and to reskill people and to retrain people. That was a fairly difficult period, I presume.
It was a major challenge in that everything from the 1959, when the power station was constructed, and little Johnny Layton and parliamentary secretary, and they got the whole concept of having a coal-powered burning station of 15 megawatt on the shores of Lough Allen, and that gave continuity. I think the challenges that was faced by the mine owners would be a lot more difficult if the ESB weren't prepared to take the coal, and the quality of the coal then they'd argue the ash content was high or whatever. But it came down to, at the end of the day, our slogan was, would you close Arigna mines for a tenth of a penny on the unit of electricity, which was deadly accurate in the economic impact. But to get the people out there and motivated to question what alternatives, if any, because there was an Arigna task force, and all the agencies, and having FOSS training courses at the time and people to retrain on that. But there was a much greater emphasis than now, I believe, to say what happened in the Midlands, where they're talking about having all these people suddenly Bornemona and the closure of Bornemona. So in that sense, we probably, there was a more active community in the sense that they could see the devastating consequences if there wasn't some alternatives. And it led to a lot of pressure on the political systems across all the political parties, that there was constant pressure kept on them, and even down to getting Loughallen reopened. That opened in 1996, which is 6 years after it closed. But I'm only giving that as an example. It's doubtful if it would have happened if the closure of Rigna, the amount of money that was put in by the ESB to actually support business like local enterprise funds, and that they had, some of them were successful, but everything in Ireland, if it's not successful, then you want to forget about it. Whereas if you learn from the lessons of it, if you did even lose the money on it, it still was worth, if you could improve on it, and somewhere down the line someone else came along with it. I mean, there'd be Anne Flynn, for instance, was looking for, down when the enterprise units were built here in Arigna, about abandoned warehouses for distilling whiskey. So, and she had worked with people from over at Boyle of bringing the whole idea. And imagine all these years later, and we're talking about 2024, where Drumshanbo and a shed and a distillery. So it wasn't, but there was very constructive ideas that was there. It's just that there were, well, the whole issue and the markets, whether they were there or not, and that big was beautiful. That the thing has turned full circle now. That smaller operation, micro.
There was probably people at the time, Sean, almost you could say were maybe ahead of their time. And the next man that I want to talk to very much would come into that particular category. He was on the teaching staff with you in Drumshanbo. He was a curate in Drumshanbo. He was parish priest in the parish of Kilronan for many years after. And that's Father Sean Tynan. Now, when people are watching these interviews on the Miners' Way and they're listening to us talk now, Father Tynan would have been one of the big driving forces about getting that project going. And when the mines closed, he very much bought into tourism. That's a major industry in the northwest of the country. And he had unbelievable vision to see what could be done here.
Well, that's, I've summed it up really, that there's no words that could describe Father Tynan's vision, that he was a dreamer. And I mean, like, it doesn't matter what direction, whether it was a community centre in Drumshanbo, like buying the Mayflower and progressing that. Without his input, it's doubtful if it would have come together. So, to the opening of the lake, to the whole idea of the walks, and then, as I say, with the Arigna Leader programme, that along with Anne Flynn and to a lesser degree myself, that he was talking about this leader program, which leader is some French words which I can't pronounce, and it was only in its infancy, but he was still interested enough to set up meetings on the whole concept of Loughallen development, which all the towns and parishes around the lake would come together and work as a unit to fight for it. And that's why, to some degree, each little town or whatever on their own, but collectively they could get more influence. So he was, not alone was he, because lots of people can have great ideas and visions and what they'd like, but he could implement them as well. And like, if you only take, which you'd know better, say in Arigna and, with the museum, the mining museum and the whole concept of having this, like, I think there was only one or two places in England or Wales afterwards that had anything similar. So the vision that he had, he was always working on a project. So anybody knew, and then when he moved from Drumshanbo out to Keju, and then that was the heartland of his operation, where Arigna was part of his parish, Keju and Ballyfernan. And I mean, he was even progressing the castle, which was a heap of ivy and stone, a bit of stonework, for burial grounds for animals. And rich Americans wanted to bury their long lost friend, and they'd be on camera network when there wasn't that much Wi-Fi or internet, if you're talking about the early 90s. So he worked and progressed ideas with pure solid determination. And it's good doing that, but to bring people along with you is the real skill. And the whole idea of, say, the walk and the walks became, when it started, was the idea about Loch Allen, about walking from Dowra to Drunkirnan and back across the Black Banks and down into the valley and back, say, into the village here. But it had expanded over to Banlafad and close. So other groups in other areas from Boyle, or whether it was
that he could
connect with, and they started to John Burke and over in Knockvicar and that, and they were having doing the phone.
There's one brilliant story on when you're talking about walks, Sean, and one story that links the whole mining industry and the walks very closely. And when Father Tynan, he used to often go night walking.
Yeah.
And he was way ahead of his time, as we mentioned, because nowadays we all meet walkers coming and they've got berets and hats with lights on them. But what Father Tynan used to use was like the pit helmet.
Yes.
When he started off. And you could meet him coming, and I know he probably put the heart crossways in people for years when he started off. You could meet him coming any hour of the night with the pit helmet on him and the light on, and regardless of the weather, he was going out and he was road testing these walks himself.
He was, yeah, and Kieran Guihan was his main aide de camp. That they come and say, Kieran, you're going for a walk. Kieran didn't realise that this could be a walk, could be 7 or 8 miles before they decide to turn around and come back. So his endless energy was even right up till eventually he was moved to transferred to Ballykillalumry, and when his health started to fail. But in all that time, he was, walking just from Mass to Arigna, from Keju across hill and back again. He didn't even bat an eyelid. But he had some interesting ones going back years when he came to Drumshanbo first. And because of their humorous nature, there was poaching on the lake, and he said there had to be something done. So he said, there was Loch Allen Conservation set up to stop these illegal fishing, but the late Sean Doherty, who was the senior politician in the area at the time, he had a quote in the Roscommon Herald, which anyone wanted to check it up will find it, that Loch Allen at night was like Sydney Harbour. So in other words, with the amount of lights out there, that it was a major. Now, whether he was sincere or whether he was saying, it still got the awareness from the ESB and what was then the Shannon Fisheries Board to seriously do something about what was happening on the lake. And today, thanks to the good work of that, there would be quite a large stock of fish on it. So from Sydney Harbour to Loch Allen, he was a person that could get things done. And, any community that's lucky enough to have people like them, because it's not just, lots of people can have individually good ideas, but to collectively bring people together and make them believe in, whatever it is. I'm sure if he'd said one day that there'd be a railway line running from Drumshanbo to Arigna again or whatever, we'll get the funding to do it.
He was this area's answer to Monsignor Horan in many ways. Final question, Sean, that I just want to put to you. Probably when he looks now at his vision of the Miners' Way Walker, we're just looking at this particular project, again, where people will be watching the videos for many years to come, hopefully. His vision, so many parts of it has come to fruition, and this is just one of them.
Oh, true. And like he was always moving to the next level, and the fact that he tied up funding like the Leader program that other areas only caught on to years after it had been developed in this area, that there'd be, he came from, I think it was down Moat for Ban area where he was a curate, and he did a lot of community festivals. So he was, and drama. I mean, we didn't deal with his whole drama, whether it was a drama group in Drumshanbo or a drama group in Keju, or all of the developments.
Capers here in Arigna that he had gone for many years.
Absolutely, yeah. And he brought some big bands into Arigna Hall.
That's right.
And so the thing is that there was nothing like, I mean, he would, look and bring a big band in and say, well, the big promoters, I'll just ring them up and we'll sort it out. So he was larger than life when it came to delivering the projects, and the fact that the enthusiasm was there, because you think that sometimes that you'd say, well, can you not take a break for a while, because he was, especially when he was in his pipe phase, when he was smoking the pipe, when he gave up the pipe, it was because at 12:30 or 1 o'clock at night, as many people would know, whether it was out in Keju, in the planning, in the war department, in his house, or whether it was in the parochial, in the curate's house in Drumshanbo, his best ideas started to flow at 12:30, 1 o'clock.
Late at night. Well, God rest him, but his vision lives on. Sean, it's great to get those memories. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Sean.
Thanks a million.
I think of the life of the miner who must work all his day underground, where his lamplight is all that will shine there, and it's dark and it's damp all around. It is 2 or 3 miles to the coal face, and the tunnel is jagged and low, but he cannot find work on the surface, so it's down in the mines he must go.